Hello, I'm David Sandoval, and I'm here presenting my final project, which I've entitled Soil pH of Select Aspen Stands in Northern New Mexico. In this presentation, I'll give a little background as to why I chose this as my project, as well as data to show whether my initial question could be answered. Without further ado, let's switch to our presentation. I'll provide audio narration as to what each slide means. First, let me give a bit of background. Here in northern New Mexico, we see aspen trees in our high elevation forests. I've seen several planted in people's yards at lower elevations, like in Santa Fe and Espanola, but we only see them grow in the wild in the forests here. Some of that has to do with the soil that the trees grow in. While aspen trees can tolerate a range of soils, they tend to thrive when the soil is within a range of acidity, which is measured in pH. Now, when I say pH, it means that stands for potential of hydrogen, since acidic compounds have a positively charged hydrogen atom to give up. So, I guess you get a side of chemistry today with your biology. Let's go ahead and go on to our next slide. So, given that aspen trees appear to prefer acidic soil, we could ask the question, is soil acidity a good indicator of whether an aspen tree is healthy? If soil acidity is a good indicator as to whether you have a healthy aspen tree, that would mean that an aspen planted in alkaline soil, that is, not soil that's acidic, but rather is closer to being a base, such as you might find in baking soda or ammonia, for example. Now, would a tree that was planted in alkali soil necessarily be sickly? To test the hypothesis, or answer the question in this case, I measured the pH of soil in two populations of aspen trees. One of the aspen stands was located near Los Alamos, whereas the other was located on the road to the Santa Fe ski area. Now for the rest of this presentation, I'll be referring to the woody, bark-bearing, leafy, above-ground parts of these trees as shoots rather than as trees proper, since aspen groves really are just one big root system connecting lots of shoots together to create, just as I said, one big organism. I measured the soil pH as close to the shoot as I could get without sticking the probe directly into an obvious root or the trunk of the shoot. I also observed the general health of the tree. Were the leaves a dark green or medium green in color? Or were they yellow, like if fall was already here? Did it look like the shoot was diseased? I also made sure to take readings off of shoots that weren't obviously chewed on by deer or elk, and shoots that hadn't been hit by somebody driving too fast in their super lifted F-350. I also made a note of what else was growing within a 10-foot radius. Were there mushrooms? Was there moss at the base of the shoot? How about spruce or pine trees growing nearby? Was the soil obviously rocky, or did it seem to be dark and presumably full of nutrients? Here I included a couple of photos of what I'm talking about when we're talking sickly or healthy shoots. I didn't measure the pH of any shoot that was physically damaged, as I said previously, by overzealous deer or elk, or by someone who wasn't careful when backing out of the forest. So, what did I find? This graph represents the pH measurements obtained from the base of the shoots I selected. As you can see, nearly all of the shoots at the Big Tesuque campground had acidic soil where they were growing, whereas none of the shoots at the Pajarito ski area had acidic soil. Keep your eye on Big Tesuque G and Pajarito B for the next couple of slides. One of the observations noted was soil depth. The pH measurement device I used has two metal probes that are about 6 inches long. On 3 of the shoots, 2 at Pajarito and 1 at Big Tesuque, the soil was rocky enough that I couldn't insert the probes more than an inch, just barely enough to get a pH reading. Again, note Pajarito B and Big Tesuque G. Given these readings, what might you expect their perceived health to be? Here we see what condition these shoots were in. Big Tesuque G and Pajarito B were both sickly, both in rocky soil, and both in non-acidic soil environments. However, the other 3 Pajarito shoots were healthy, even though their soil was not acidic at all. Here we note other things about these two populations of aspen. Big Tesuque, as you might recall from our aspen lab, is full of tall aspen shoots that have been around for more than 100 years. Pajarito's population, on the other hand, is at the edge of the burn scar of the Las Conchas wildfire of 2011. Pajarito's population is a mixed conifer forest that happens to have some aspen close by, whereas Big Tesuque has lots of aspen, and some mixed conifers are starting to grow in. Based on what we found here, it would be difficult to say that using pH readings by themselves would be a good indicator of whether an aspen tree is healthy or not. There are definitely other factors in play, such as the age of the stands. For example, all of the healthy trees at Pajarito had moss growing at the base of the shoot. Could that moss be providing something that the shoot needs? Also, most of the Pajarito stand was thick enough that you couldn't walk through it. Could these shoots be competing for resources and making the soil poor in the process? In any case, it appears that pH might be one indicator among many that could be used to predict whether an aspen tree might grow well in that environment, but really, it shouldn't be the only one.